Yes, welcome to the virtual office hours, January 25th, 12 p.m. Eastern, and I hope you're all doing great. No respiratory diseases, nothing else plaguing you. I had something last week, but I'm back and it's still all over the place. So, um, it- I will be showing you today a module that we added to the training. It's called the Deep Care module. I'll show you what is there for you available and walk you through that a little bit. And then I would like to walk you through the first part of something called the Deep Care Playbook. And let's get to it. Okay, I'll start sharing my screen with you. Somebody is typing, and I'm just going to was you. Yes, no worries. I think you're all muted right now. Okay, great. So let me go to the screen and let me show you how to locate that module that I'm just talking about. All right, just a second. There we are. Okay, so this is our training, and beneath all the modules, there's this deep care module. You don't see this one yet. Don't worry about that one. It will be available to you soon. But this one, we just opened it today. So the things that have been added to your training and that are hidden in this module are this deep care playbook. I'll show you exactly what that is, and we'll be looking at it today, actually. And then there are some trainings that we actually included in the graduate club, and we found them so crucial for the main GTR training that we transferred some of them here. And namely, it's the fascia training. So if you've heard about fascia, you will know that it's something that connects all your body. It's present in all the parts of your body, and there is a deep connection between fascia and the trauma. So what you have is a video lecture, notes, and also in March, Janina will be taking you through a fascia release training. So that's there for you. We have already done this with our grad club members, but we're going to do it again for you. And just to add a little bit of an introduction here, the reason why we added this module into the main training is because it is time, even before you graduate, even before you go through the main training, to uh, develop the habit of taking good care of yourself as a practitioner. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go into that playbook, and we'll hopefully share in this session why that is important. But we just want to get you into the habit of doing this not as a luxury, but as something that is an integral part of your work as a practitioner. Then there's a lecture on the psoas muscle. The psoas muscle also plays an important role in trauma. I don't go into depth about this in the main GTR training when it comes to the physiology side of things. I focus on the vagus nerve, but the truth is that the fascia, the psoas muscle, and the whole lymphatic system have to do with how the body holds on to trauma. So again, you have the notes, you have the theoretical lecture, and there's also going to be a live a workshop where you will be doing the exercises with Janina. And finally, we have the lymphatic drainage, also the same thing with lymphatic drainage workshop. And just so you know, all of these three are something number one for you to do as a practitioner to take good care of yourself, but also to add to your work with clients, again, because there's that intimate connection between trauma and these three elements: the fascia, the psoas muscle, and the lymphatic system. And oftentimes students ask us if there's, that you want more. That's what we hear a lot of the time. You want more, you want to learn more. So this is that first step in the direction. But of course, there's only so much we want to put into this training without overwhelming you. Wow. So this is something to look forward to in terms of the live workshops. They're going to take place in March, April, and May. And just so you know, Janina has education. She has background in German. It's called she's a Heilpraktikerin, which means like a health practitioner. And in Germany, that is somebody who is qualified to work with real patients, medical patients, even without being a doctor or nurse. So she would use all these complementary techniques such as lymphatic drainage or cupping or working with the fascia, etc., to help patients get better. And of course, most of it is all applicable just for our general well-being and also to help your clients. These live sessions will also be great for you if you have questions for her, as in, can I do this, or can my client do this if they have this and that condition, or how often, and all these questions that will be there for you. Before I go into the playbook, does anyone have questions that they want to ask about this? And if not, then we can just dive into self-care, and I'll be looking forward to hearing what you have to share about that. So, all right, so deep care playbook. Of course, you would download it here. I'll first show it to you at a glance, just so you know the parts. And I'll just make this window smaller here. All right, so it's a big playbook. You don't have to tackle it all at once, and we will go through it in these sessions as well. But we'll begin with an inventory. So I would like to do this with you today, talking about what is your history with self-care and how do you feel about self-care. We'll talk about these questions here. And then there's space for you to reflect on your own history, self-care history, and then reflect about what will happen if nothing changes in your self-care. Then the next time, hopefully, we'll talk about your self-care foundations, because in my head, the basic framework of self-care is the things that we don't want to do and we want to eliminate, and then the things we do want to do and the things that we want to engage in because they replenish us and nurture us. So we'll be guiding you to eventually create that basic framework and figure out what your absolute no list is in both professional and personal areas, and what your absolute yes list in both areas. And then in the next part, we'll be looking at more specific self-care routines that you can build for yourself. What are some of the things that would replenish you? And to give you a little bit of inspiration, I took the 5-element Chinese medicine teachings and came up with some ideas and suggestions, and this will be fun to do. I don't want to go into that today, but here are some ideas about what would self-care look like to enhance your water element and your wood element, fire, earth, metal. And I do find that in order to be able to take good care of yourself, you want to have a little bit of all the 5. Okay. So we'll go through all of this. We'll create a blueprint so that every time you are in need of self-care, or you're thinking, how can I create self-care? You already have a blueprint ready. You don't have to come up with it from scratch. And then we have some pages to actually plan your routines. And then finally, looking at if obstacles come up, how do we troubleshoot? Are there some hidden benefits of not engaging in self-care? How can we overcome obstacles, etc.? So let me just go to the very first page here to start our discussion from. Now, in my mind, practitioner self-care is a little bit separate from self-care as such, because we're not doing this just for ourselves. We are doing this so that the quality of our work has a certain standard. And as it just happens, coaching, healing, therapy, counseling, they belong in the category of the professions where this is not just an option, it's an integral part of our work. And so we really want impeccable self-care. And that impeccable self-care means that we consistently nurture our well-being, that we actually have a self-care in plan. We know what that self-care consists of. We have de-traumatized our system to a great degree. We know how to prevent traumatization and what to do with it should it happen. And our self-care is penciled in our calendar. Now, I assume that most of us are not at this ideal place, myself included. So let's begin with the inventory. And let me just begin with this first question, which is, what does self-care mean for you? And if emotions come up with it, let's talk about that as well. I'll go back to you and hopefully, oh, we have Virginia coming as well. Sorry about that. I know she will have plenty to say. All right. So what does self-care mean for you? And do any emotions come up for you when we talk about this topic? If you could raise your hand, that would help me so that I can see easier. And in the meantime, I think Virginia on the line. Hey, Virginia, I'll just say hello to you.
Hello.
Hello.
The camera's not working, damn.
Yeah, we see darkness. So try to figure it out. In the meantime, I'll go to Leah and I think Ramona, I know, is that hands clapping or is your hand up? Oh, you're probably okay. I just want to say hi. All right. So I'll go to them. Virginia, we started talking about self-care. So I know you'll have plenty to say about that. And before we figure out how to see you, I'll go to Leah. Leah, can you unmute yourself? Can you try?
Yeah, I think I'm
Yeah,
unmuted.
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. There you are.
I am so incredibly excited as you're talking and showing us this new module. I literally had joy bubbling up. Does everybody know what I mean by that? It's literally a feeling of like, and here's why. Because I have made self-care the #1 priority for my life. I've said it before, but I didn't follow through. And, you know, I think many of you know some of the many issues that I've had from trauma, but that really manifested in my body and what I realized for so long. And I did have emotion and have emotion coming up about this, is that for most of my life, I made self-care a low priority because it was all about care for everybody else. And if there was time left over, then I would do some things. Or I'd sporadically, you know, go to appointments with naturopaths and chiropractors, that kind of thing, which I believe is also all included in self-care. And so after last year, and, you know, not being able to lose the weight and not understanding what that was really about, and you know, I decided, and the irony, and I may have mentioned this when one of the first calls of the year when I told you about my COVID. So I had COVID, for those of you that don't know, at New Year's. And, you know, I had prior to that said, I am going to make self-care a priority. This is going to be my #1 thing that I'm going to focus on. And then I got hit with COVID, and I just thought that was the universe's really kind of interesting way of going, okay, let's see. And you have no choice, right? Anybody, I mean, or a bad flu or anything, it's like, I'm bedridden. I have no choice but to completely and 100% just take care of myself and my needs. And so after my recovery, and still it's still around, but it's much, much, much better. I realized that I don't ever want to, #1, be in that boat again. Because I mean, you know, I think you're going to get sick. Sometimes viruses will hit, but I think the degree, and luckily it wasn't a bad case for me, but I realized that my self-care is really critical, not just for me, but for everybody else. That the best thing I can do for caring for everyone, including my clients, my family, is to take the absolute best care of me. So this is why I'm like so excited about this, because it just puts it all in, you know, kind of place. But I've already started some practices, or, you know, continued, well, doing some more regularly, let's put it that way. And every day I start my day with just concentrated self-care, for me. And then throughout the day, because this is what I've learned, it can't just be sort of, I do my routine in the morning and then I go crazy the rest of the day, just go, 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 and not, you know. So I have implemented self-care practices all through my day, and including my bedtime routine. So I'm trying to really live what I have preached. You know, I tell all this stuff to everybody else, to all my clients, and, you know, but just wasn't practicing for myself. So thank you for really implementing this.
Thank you for your feedback. And I was smiling to myself as you were talking about your COVID, because as I was finishing this module last week, I started to not feel so well. My daughter brought something from school, and I would most probably have just pushed myself to be present with you at the virtual office hours, but I just lost my voice. So that became a non-option. So that was kind of also the universe's way of showing me that that's what self-care looks like. And yes, so to go back to that question, what I'm hearing from you is that what self-care means for you at this stage of your life is taking care of yourself the way you take care of others, if not more.
More.
Yeah. Yes.
More is kind of my intention, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I can tell others to do these healthy practices, and whether they do them or not, that's up to them. But the difference, I think, for me is that I have decided that this is not an option anymore. That's the difference, I think, for me from the past. Was it was an optional thing. You know, like I said, if I had time, so yeah, what good self-care means to me now is that it is critical to incorporate it every day throughout the day.
Yes. And so that was the second question, what emotions come up? And I think many of us have did have what you just mentioned, that, you know, self-care an option when there's a bit of time, or when things get too bad and we get either sick or we're just so shattered that there's no other way anyway. And then now it's not an option. It's a must.
Yes. And I heard something recently. I was on a networking thing, and they started off talking about goals, and then a number of the speakers reframed it and said they don't like the word goals because it's almost like a have to, you gotta, you know, and preferred the word intention, was one person. But another person said something that I really loved, and that was keeping promises to yourself. So a goal is a promise, really, that you're making. And so and we often, you know, will break those promises to ourselves. Like we promise to, you know, exercise every day, and we promise to eat healthy, and then we don't keep the promise. And I think that's where the emotion comes up, is that you're just constantly letting yourself down, and you don't care. Because, you know, when I thought about it, it was like, I would never, unless something really happened, break a promise to someone else. If I promise to do something, I'm going to do it no matter what, right? Unless I'm really sick. So we have now established is you need to go back to yourself and say, sorry, I can't do that. But what's made the difference for me is that thinking shift of, I am no longer going to break promises to myself. If I'm promising to do this, and sometimes things happen where I can't, you know, let's say go for a 40-minute walk, but I will go for a 3-minute walk. If it's literally like, I'm going to walk to the mailbox and walk back again, because that's all I have time. I've kept my promise of walking every day. Does this make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to let everybody know that I would like these virtual office hours on top of everything they have been thus far to be also a place to keep you in that promise to yourself for everybody, because the obstacles and challenges with self-care that you mentioned, I think we've all had them or still have them. We all know what good self should look like, and then the application part is harder for most of us. And as practitioners, we can show up for our clients the way they deserve us to show up for them if we don't practice good self-care. So now it's not just it's good for us as people, but it's a must for us as practitioners. So that's the crucial element, and I would like this place to be one of those places where we come back and discuss this too. Ramona, I think your head was up. You disappeared for a second there. Go ahead. And there.
Hey, everybody. So even for me, like my baseline of physical self-care is probably a little better than the average masses, right? It's not perfect, and it comes and goes, and I'm finding I need to readjust. Now I can't do everything the same I could even 3 years ago. I have to change it. So what I try to support women with is don't take the all or nothing approach. It's not necessary. And then build it strategically. So don't change everything at once. Do one thing until it becomes a part of you, rather than overwhelming. And I think for me, part of my self-care is needing to do the stuff that doesn't have to be done, like things that bring me joy, right? So I find, for example, I just enrolled in singing lessons. Did I have to do that? No. Not at all, right? It's completely unnecessary. I'm doing it because it indulges my creative side and brings me joy instead of just producing or existing, right? So that's mine. I have to run for another call, but that's just a couple thoughts I have.
Thank you, thank you. And just to add to that, that's exactly it. And we'll be talking about this, that self-care is obviously not just, going for a run and getting enough sleep. It is including those things that replenish you and that bring you energy, as opposed to the opposite. And oftentimes the reason why we don't do them is because we don't have specific ideas as to what it looks like. You will encounter this in coaching in so many ways when tackling any kind of goals with your clients, that unless there's a certain degree of specificity, and you will see that also in the GTR sessions, even when we do the grief processes, the endings, the closures, I get really specific with them of where they're going to go, with whom, what is that going to look like. And that's also necessary to do with self-care for most of us anyway. I would also like to ask, and that's another question in that inventory, what are the most common obstacles for you when it comes to practicing self-care? So just to give you an example, for me, I find that one of my obstacles is overcoming the nice girl syndrome, which is just another way of saying everybody before me, because it would appear like I don't love them enough, I don't care for them enough, being disagreeable. So there's certainly that. And then sometimes being a parent, and sometimes running a business, that's also the overload sort of thing. What is it for you? I'm curious to know. And if you raise your hand, that would be very useful. Virginia, I'm going to you. Sorry, Kim, and then Virginia.
Thank
I
you.
think you're on, Kim. Yeah.
Thank you. This is so amazing and so powerful, and I really love it. My self-care in the past has been after being a habitual people pleaser and taking care of everybody else. My own self-care would be just a glass of wine, and I mean that's the worst thing. Not the worst thing, but I mean certainly not honoring myself. I mean I love my wine and whatnot, but it's just a matter of time. And it's the people pleasing, is I have to take care of everybody else, and it's still there, and I work on it. And for instance, I was sick last week and I canceled a coffee meeting with a prospect for this networking group, and I needed to honor myself, and it's work constantly. And I also love that you have in this absolute yeses and absolute nos, because the clarity that we will get from that is going to be so powerful as well. I'm just so happy that this is here and available to us. So thank you.
Yes, well, we are going to go through every piece of that just to give examples, because sometimes it might not be so clear of what those absolute yeses and absolute nos are, and either next week or something like that, we'll talk about it. But yes, so one of the reasons why people don't follow up with things is something called cognitive overload, which means that if you have to think about it, it takes too much energy. The brain consumes a lot of energy by thinking, and so it naturally wants to avoid it. So we do nothing. But the idea of that absolute no and absolute yes list was to create some boundaries, and eventually resulting into a manifesto where you don't have to think about it. If it belongs under that category, that conditions, it's a no. And if it belongs onto another, it's an absolute yes. So for example, it might be that I still do remember the times when people, when they got ill, they went to bed and rested, and that was the only thing that came across their mind. And then somehow the world got crazy, and me with it. and now it's the what can I take so I can still fulfill my work and personal obligations.
Well, exactly. And that's just it. I went to work once when I was in the computer industry with pneumonia. Because I had a deadline. I had to get the computers out, and it's like, goodness gracious. At the end, I look at my daughters, and my daughter does not miss a workout no matter what. She arranges her life. I'm like, holy crap, and I think boundaries is the big word that's missing for me as well. And you mentioned that boundaries is huge.
Yeah, so we'll do that. Wonderful. Okay, we have Virginia and then Mary Elizabeth. So I'll go to you. Hi.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, it's very good morning here.
What time is it for you?
It is now I can't bloody see because it's too early in the morning at 4:30. And my oldest dog got up to go to the toilet, which woke me up, and I went, oh, it's 4 o'clock, quick.
So just to give an introduction to you for maybe the people who don't know you so well, and speaking of self-care, so Virginia has a farm with a lot of rescue animals. So on any given day, she takes care of many, many animals. Now, I would be curious to know how you find time for self-care and what stands in your way.
Well, stands in my way. I learned a very long time ago that, because I always say that I'm made of good old peasant stock. I don't stop. I keep going no matter what. And then my body and the universe would say, well, no, that's not a good thing, Virginia. So now I listen to my body. And if I'm feeling off, that's when I go, okay, I need to do something here. I won't see my clients. I'm a Bowen therapist as well. And if I'm not feeling 100%, because you've got to give that energy, I'll reschedule. But I won't sort of say, if something else is happening that's more important to me, I will basically say, look, I can't make it today because of. But when it comes to the farm and the animals, there's no exception. It's like, if I have been badly diarrhea, sorry girls, but I've had where I have felt like absolute crap, but I have to. And that's a matter of I have to, because these animals depend on me and they need to get fed. It's like your child. Even when you don't feel well, you still have to take care of your child. You have to send your child to school or whatever. So I have dragged myself on a number of occasions to make sure that the animals are fed, and then I come back in, and then that's when I go into self-care. It's like, okay, now I feel like crap. I don't have to do anything else for the rest of the day. So that's when I'll go to bed or whatever. So that's a thing that that's my responsibility. And I listen to, I don't know if anyone knows of Esther Hicks Abraham. And one of the things, I did a volunteer when Esther came out here a few months ago, and responsibility, a lot of people take responsibilities. Oh, I have to do it. I have to do it. Responsibility is freedom of choice. When you take on a responsibility, it is then your freedom of choice to do whatever it is needed for you to feel good. And that's what life is, feeling good. So I would not be feeling good if I knew that all my animals were out there. And, you know, I mean, I know they're animals and they haven't been fed, and they come to depend on me. So that's one thing that I won't not do, even when I'm feeling like crap.
If I may, I'll just comment a little bit on what you're saying, because the animals are such an amazing example of, you know, responsibilities that sometimes we cannot avoid. You know, sometimes we might even like them, but they're unavoidable. But the truth is that many of us, even if we had children, they're not so young anymore that we would have to be in that same mindset as we had to be when they were very young. But it's very difficult to let go of that. You know, because the instinct might be, okay, child comes first, and that's nature doing its job, and that's wonderful. But then when that drags into life stages where that's not necessary anymore, it starts being counterproductive. And I see this a lot. Doesn't matter if we have children or not, but I see it a lot in people in helping professions, this attitude, like wanting to attend to the client, and to others like a mother attends to a younger child, and of course women. But what I loved about what you said, Virginia, is that, okay, there are sometimes responsibilities that you can't avoid, but you also have a backup plan. So in your case, it is, I do what I have to do, but then I go back to bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things is when I talk to any of my clients, one of the things I say, if you take anything away from today, it's you must be the center of your own universe, because if you're not okay, no one's okay. So that's a big one with me. But yeah, it's the self-care is there. I just need to do that, and then I can continue on. And I know, knowing that with the way that I have things now, is they only get, other than my dogs and my cats, they only get fed once a day, and that's whatever time I choose for that to be. So I know that when I've done that, I can then go, okay, now I need to do what I need to do for me, making sure that I'm okay.
And I love your example of you at the farm, because as far as I can recall, you have to feed twice a day. Right. And so your example of going back to bed is so great, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to feed them the second time. So that's a great visual to think of self-care. It's just like, you know, with your clients, if you didn't give back to yourself with sleep, whatever, you just wouldn't be able to feed them.
No. And that's the thing, is like, there's just, when Phil sells his business, which hopefully that'll be soon, it's just me here. And that's something that I've chosen to do. That's freedom of choice. I've chosen to do. I've chosen to take on these animals. I've chosen to make this way of life. And that in itself, when I've done that, and even if I'm not feeling well, etc., when I've done that, it brings me joy.
Yes.
It brings me joy.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. It's like, what brings me joy? That, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go to Mary Elizabeth and then to Lucy for a second, because they want to share something. I think you're on, Mary Elizabeth. Try.
Hi, everyone. This is a good topic for me because I spent my whole life not knowing how to take care of myself, with the result that I have a lot of chronic issues in my health. And I don't know what happened to me on December 31st, but I just got so sick so fast, and I'm still recovering, and I'm not recovered yet. So I'm really frustrated because I basically was bedridden for the first 2 weeks, and I just don't even understand what happened. But the interesting thing for me is that, I mean, I've spent most of my life just so fatigued all the time and pushing through it. And Kim, when you mentioned going to work with pneumonia, I mean, when I was teaching school, I would be at school with double pneumonia because the principal would pressure me, and I wouldn't know how to say no. And in fact, when my doctor told me that I needed to leave the 1 year and take a leave of absence, she put so much pressure on me that I didn't do it. And at the end of the year, well, I never did get back teaching. And as a consequence, I didn't get my disability because they said, well, you were well enough to make it to the end of the year. So it cost me a lot of money. I fought it 3 times.
This is such a great example. Thank you so very much. And I'll come back to you. I just want to say, oftentimes when we think that we just have to push through things, that it's going to be somehow better for others, most of the time it's not better for them, and it doesn't do us any good.
Yeah, well, it didn't help me. I mean, the custodian, I was so unwell that the custodian had to carry my book bag in and out. But the principal was like, well, you're letting down the parents, you're letting down the children, you're letting down the staff. And of course, at that point, I had never learned to say no. And I'm just learning it now. But for me, going through, I mean, it's been almost a month now that I have been so, whatever has happened to me. And the thing is, now I can tell actually when I'm tired because I'm getting so much rest. But I still haven't let go of the frustration. I canceled my coaching appointments, and my sleep is crazy. That's why I was late today, because I was dragging myself out of bed, and I'm working with a sleep psychologist, and she said, well, just go to bed when you're tired and get up when you feel like it. Well, the way I feel right now would be, I'll never get up because I'm just so tired. But I can see the difference. And I have had this week, I had 2 days where I had good energy for me, like it was better than my norm. So, I mean, here I am at my age, finally learning.
Yes,
But
yes.
it took a long time.
You know, one of the items on my absolute no list, Mary Elizabeth, is also I hate rushing. And I hate that, especially in the morning when I wake up before I get to work. And also, for example, when I'm getting ready for these virtual office hours or for an appointment with a client, I hate having to rush as I'm preparing myself. So don't look at it, please, as you are late. I'm glad that you were honoring yourself and did not push yourself. You made it. You didn't miss anything. There's
Thank
the
you.
recording going to be available. So it was just what you needed. Yes. And one of the reasons why I wanted this deep care modules to be part of our GTR training is because a lot of us who have been teaching coaches, certainly myself included, you give your heart and soul to the students, and the students give your heart and soul to learning the material. And I've had the honor of encountering and working with people who want to help other people. What is a more beautiful mission in life? And oftentimes that doesn't happen. And one of the very obvious culprits have been, okay, so these coaches or therapists, counselors, they don't have the business side of things covered, or they hate doing marketing. And that is certainly true. That tends to be a very common obstacle, but one that is hidden and that often is disguised beneath business obstacles is this lack of self-care. So for example, at some point, the coaches who actually did manage to get some clients and do one-on-one sessions, they often get to a point where they're exhausted, shattered. And so their thinking often goes into, okay, how can I restructure my offerings so that I don't have to work so much? And so, business coaches often lead them into, okay, you can do group programs, or you can put, you can have your package as a digital product. And that is fine if you're doing it because that's where your work is taking you. But I find that oftentimes it's just the lack of self-care not allowing you to show up for the clients in a way you would normally be able to do. And I want to put this out there because as much as group formats are amazing, digital formats are amazing, the one-on-ones are still necessary. And yes, they do take energy. And that's why that consistent self-care is important. And that's also why the 3 selected lectures and workshops that we put into that deep care module are what they are, because for example, we sit most of the time as we do our work. Well, our fascia is affected by it. And so you're going to learn how to work with that and do some practices that you can do at your desk or stand up, do that for 5 minutes, or even when you're watching something fun in the evening. So hopefully that will be an amazing start for you to get into this way of working and living. Thank you. Lucy, I'm going to you. So you can share what you wanted to share.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late. Another commitment, but it's so nice to see all of you. Self-care is a really important aspect of my life. It was brought to my attention in a big way when I was in a car accident when I was pregnant with our 3rd child. And that's now 32 years ago. So in 32 years, it really forced me to decide what matters most. And when I say what, is that the who matters most. And if I was to be able to be present to raise our children, I was a stay-at-home mom, meant that I needed to heal myself so that I could actually be the best mom I could be, even though that was its own kind of roller coaster, depending on the day and the level of pain and so forth. And yet I learned along the way that when I kept my eye on the vision, so can I be my best self so that that's what I exude to the world, then it became easier to say no. And I got to saying no without explaining. That was another step, but it was no, thank you, I'm not available. And because I don't know if somebody else is going to agree or disagree with my reasoning, I just knew for me first, it was a no. So the idea of the absolute no and the absolute yes is a great place to start, because when I'm doing my self-care on a daily basis, and I know my absolutes, then I can also go, okay, so maybe I didn't do as much of it today as I did yesterday, but that's okay because I am doing it daily. And I know my limits, though, in terms of be it sleep or nutrition, which to me are important because I've gotten to know the aspects that will change a pain level. And sleep and nutrition happen to be at the top of my list. Everyone figure out, what works for you and doesn't work for you. And so it became it's my life experiment. How could I be the best me with the circumstances at the time? And in healing myself, ultimately, it ended up that I could be more present for others, not just my family, but for other things that I wanted to do in my life. And so I'm just going to throw out a few things as examples. So I have a yoga mat in the bedroom. So when I wake up, I'm automatically doing, be it some yoga pose of some, whatever comes to me. I also happen to have a basket of therapy balls. And I teach that now because I thought, well, if I really want to learn it, I'll teach it as well. So I teach it once a week, and then I'll roll my feet, but I also keep a set of therapy balls at the front door so that I'll roll my feet out before I go for a walk. So now I've improved my proprioception in my feet, which is the furthest distance from your brain. And so if I have more sensation in my feet, that means there's probably a little more going on all the way down to the feet. So, and then the same with nutrition. I may cook once, but I'll eat 3 times so that I'm using my time wisely in terms of prep, and knowing then that I've got 3 or 4 meals out of it instead of cooking every time. I'm rather fastidious about the quality of the food, and adding certain elements such as a pickle of some sort at pretty much every meal, because I know how much that has increased my gut bacteria, which is directly linked to your brain function. And so for me, because it was a brain injury, it was another step into healing. So another thing, at my age, I'm 63. I know that
Can I just interrupt for a second, Lucy?
Mhm.
Here's what I'm really curious about. So what I'm understanding from what you're saying, you are really, really great when it comes to sleep and nutrition. And that's where your self-care comes easy to you. But as it so happens, usually there are areas in everybody's life when it's not as easy. So if I may, I would like to ask you, if you think of those areas, what tends to stand in your way? That's one of the questions in the self-care inventory.
I think what stands in my way is that I'll think, oh, I can just slip that in. I'll just do this little bit of extra. But then in essence, if it's on a timeline, there's only so many hours in the day, it will push into something else that may have been more important to me. And so then it becomes this, then I do question myself. So why was I doing that versus sticking with what was, not necessarily the absolute, but more important at the time that I gave into. And
so it would be, for example, somebody asks you to help them with something, and you would do that right away, thinking, I'll just slip that in.
Sure. And then thinking, oh, well, it'll only take half an hour when it ends up being an hour. So now I not only slipped it in, but it also went longer than I thought it was going to. Or acquiescing on things because then I'd rather not have a hassle about, say an argument or whichever with a person. So I know that the areas that I'm good at become examples of what I need to do in the areas that I am challenged.
Okay.
And then to
So
use that
that
model
would
and
be
overlay it.
learning to estimate the time that it takes, and then the fear of conflict if I say no. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Things like that. So it's and it's a daily practice for me to look at, okay, what matters most and what's the timelines, and then knowing that the healthier I am, the better that I can show up. I know it's logical, it's the living the logic. And so and it works. It makes a big difference because I'm constantly questioning myself. Where am I at? What am I doing? Is this too much? Is it not? Do I still feel inspired? And to work, kind of play from there.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Just to give everybody another example, and if you have something else to share as what stands in the way, I know that one of the things for me is I find that sometimes I impose deadlines on myself that really don't need to be deadlines, and then I push myself to finish because we've been taught that that's how goals work, and you have to put an end date to things because otherwise you just wouldn't be taking action. And I find that that's just not true for me, and that it's an act of self-care for me if I delay a deadline that was just arbitrarily put in place, and it doesn't have to be. So that's another example. I'm going to Donna, whose hand is up, and also Maureen, I know that your hand was up and now it's not. So if you want to talk, just let me know. And okay, there you are, Donna, and then Maureen.
Okay, hi.
Hey.
I guess in my case, some of the obstacles that have come up for me would be like, oh, it'll cost too much.
Mhm.
Financial limitations or something. I put a limitation on, no, I can do it on my own. I don't need to go for a massage, let's say, right? Or a facial. I'll do it myself, save the money, that kind of thing. That'll get in my way. The other thing was deadlines, for sure. I always put deadlines in front of self-care. The other one too that, and I found this more with clients, but I'm also guilty of it too, is mindset and beliefs. So like if they think, what's the use? It's not going to change anything anyway. Like, you know, that kind of, if you come in with that kind of mindset, you probably aren't going to get down to business of self-care. It's kind of like, or they think that they've been taught that taking care of themselves is self-indulgent. It's being selfish. It's you know, all those Catholic things that were imposed on you, that, you know, religious kind of mindsets and beliefs.
Yes.
And certainly illness or physical conditions. And in my case, it would be like the recent heart procedure I went through, you know, and the doctor tells you, take it easy. And, you know, and so now you start over taking it easy, if you know what I mean, because they kind of put you into a scare mode in a way, you know, you're susceptible, you could have a stroke, or you could, you know, like they start putting all these limitations on you, and you start thinking, ooh, wow, you know, don't want to do that, you know, so you start watching, you don't exert yourself, or you don't, yeah. So those are the things that I would come up with as obstacles.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's definitely, and I do want to say that, you know, sometimes the financial reasons could be an obstacle, whether it's for you or for your client. And then it becomes a question of how to still take good care of yourself, even without those specific things. And we will be giving you plenty of examples of that in the training, by the way. And speaking of, it feels selfish, or I don't know, vain. The good news is, you know, you are in the grad club, so there's also the cupping therapy that we did on the face, but also with fascia. You have so much to look forward to, because most of the things that you can do on your face and that make you look good and that give you a natural facelift are just the ones that are just healthy. That's why the face looks good. So whether it's the, you know, the cupping that we did, or the lymphatic drainage that you're going to learn in deep care module, or working with the balls and rolling them, you can do that on your neck, also in your face. That works on the level of fascia and the level of the lymph, and then we'll do some for the psoas muscle. And all of that is to put you in a state of emotional well-being, but it just so happens that it makes you more beautiful as well. So for those of you who have a little bit of that, this is a selfish issue, just think of it as you're doing it for your health, emotional well-being. Yeah, thank you. Marie, can you unmute yourself? There.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give a practical example, which is probably too much information, but I put my hand down and stopped my video because I had to use the washroom. You probably saw me drinking tea. And I thought, oh, before I would just hold it to the end of our meeting. But I thought, no, self-care is like doing what you need to do in the moment. And I just wanted to say thank you so much, Isabella, for making this module. And I just really need to look at myself. And you said cognitive overload. I was like, ding. I think I have a lot of that. And then the boundaries, like with ourselves. I know I really need to work on that. And yeah, being a retired teacher, Mary Elizabeth, I know what you mean about still going to work when you're sick, because you can't let everyone down. And thanks, Virginia, for joining us. I know you don't get to very often. It's nice to hear your voice. So anyway, thank you, Isabella. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, yes. So just to repeat, this will now hopefully become part of our blood, this self-care, and we will use this space to support each other in it, and we'll be adding and finding ways in the training to cultivate this in you. If you feel like you want to do something with the conversation that we had today, then download that playbook, and you don't have to do everything. Just look at that first part and look at the inventory. If you feel like reflecting on some of the questions that we just covered today, that would be great. There's a space where you can write your self-care history, so that, dear me, this is what my self-care history has been like, and reflect on that. And there's also a space for if you want to make one little commitment for your self-care, and I do mean little, don't overwhelm yourself. It could be something like what you just did, Maureen. If you've had a lot to drink and you're in the middle of a conversation, you just stop and you honor that. And for now, it's not so much the question of will you follow up with this one commitment that you make. It's more to start putting yourself in that mindset of self-care is happening. Okay. Virginia, your hand is up, so let me go back to you before we wrap up. All right.
Yeah, just listening to everybody and their self-care, and it came to me, and I thought, and thank you, Maureen. It's lovely to see you guys as well. Sometimes self-care takes over what brings you joy, and today is that, because my self-care is, in order to join you girls, I have to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning, which makes it a very, very long day. And with the stuff that I need to do, self-care is like, as much as I love you guys, and I really, really, really miss the meetings, my self-care is I have to make sure that I look after me and get the sleep that I need. The other side of that is that one little thing. I made a promise to myself, and I did it today. If I'm up at 4 a.m. for whatever reason, and it's the day of the meeting, here I am. So that's also self-care.
Yes, that's such a wonderful example, Virginia, and we'll get to that in our next sessions. That's what I ultimately want us to be at when it comes to self-care. The if A, then B, so that we don't have to figure it out from scratch. If I'm up, I'll go. If I'm tired, I rest. So it has to be simple like that, because if not, we'll just end up doing whatever calls our name the loudest. And I think that's one of the common denominators why we often neglect self-care. So let me just take a brief look at you. If there's anyone else, Lucy, you were waving at me before. I don't know if you were just saying hi to Virginia or if you wanted to say something. So please go
actually,
ahead.
I happen to sit in our front window where, again,
Okay.
this was a move. I moved my desk so that I was in a window where I could see more, as well as the sunshine comes in here. And it happened somebody walked by, so they saw me and I waved. So, but yeah, I'm waving to all of you at the same time. So
Thank you. And that just brings me, let me just wrap up with this point. We'll get to it. The reason why I included the 5 element section into the playbook is because I wanted to show you how very different self-care can look like. And those 5 elements demonstrated so nicely. So for example, what you just said, Lucy, the sitting in front of the window and waving. An earth element remedy or self-care remedy would be gathering with like-minded people, being part of a community. And so I discovered this when the pandemic started, how this was needed in students. When I used to do live calls, and I found out that many of them reached out to me and said, thank you, that they needed to hear, okay, I don't need to come to these calls just to learn. I can just sit in the other people's energy and let that be self-care. So self-care and joy Virginia, which is what you mentioned. Yes, let's make it about joy and what replenishes you. And if you really want to take that one little self-care commitment, make it about one that brings you joy. Thank you so very much, ladies. I'll end with this, and I'll see you the next week. Thank you very much for coming. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.